It's indeed a pleasure to be a moderator to this particular session. And what an apt time to have this particular session. In the earlier session, there were a lot of discussions, questions relating to governance. And it's an apt time to have a global perspective. The vision of the Institute is to be a global leader in promoting good corporate governance. Promoting corporate governance necessarily involves knowing the practices in the different countries, learning from the good practices of the different countries. So we have with us a very eminent panel. We have Mr. Haji Usman from Malaysia. We have Mr. Tom from Kenya, and I have Zara from South Africa, and I have Mr. Rashid Khan from Bangladesh. He would be also covering the Islamic perspective. In fact, I would like to give each of my panelists enough time to take us through the experiences in their respective countries. But just before I start the session, I would just like to set the tone of corporate governance in terms of our practices in India. The starting point, of course, was in Companies Act 2013. We did see several of the provisions which were earlier in the listing agreement moving into the Companies Act and getting a statutory force, even with respect to small and medium-sized companies. Listed entities were also governed by listing agreement, and therefore, some of these provisions were in any case taken care of by listed companies. But now, we also have the small and medium-sized companies ensuring compliance with provisions of corporate governance because of compliance of Companies Act. We have the secretarial standards 1 and 2, which were recently amended effective 1st of October 2017, which have harmonized several of these practices. While harmonizing these practices, we actually came across several industry practices which were considered, and a uniform practice has been prescribed in the secretarial standards. And I'm very happy to note that there was an adoption of the secretarial standards by the Malaysian Institute. Also, when you refer to corporate governance is more like chasing a moving target. It's not something which is etched in tablets of stone, it keeps moving. So, with these few words, I would now request Mr. Haji Usman to give his perspective from a Malaysian perspective. I could give this to you, or you could go there, whatever you're more comfortable with. Over to you.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh, and good afternoon. I think I'll be more confident by standing rather than sitting down. It is indeed my pleasure and honor to stand before all of you to say a few words on behalf of the Council and members of Malaysian Association of Company Secretaries, or MEX. I also thank your institute to give me this opportunity and the kind hospitality that ICSI has extended to both of us. I would like to congratulate the Institute of Company Secretaries of India, ICSI, on the occasion of the Golden Jubilee Year National Convention. It's indeed very overwhelming for me to have stand before all of you and to see over 1,200 leaders from trade and industry, senior corporate professionals, corporate directors, senior officers from government and academics, and other stakeholders attending this convention. The theme of the convention, which is Company Secretary Shaping New India 2022 Through Good Governance, is indeed very appropriate and relevant to the profession of company secretaries in India, and I must also add, is throughout the world. The company secretary is now involved from just being a member of the board and taking minutes of meeting or filing clerks, but now evolved to being a key component and a business advisors to the board of directors, especially with regards to issues pertaining to company law, corporate governance, tax, and government regulations. To fulfill this role, the company secretary needs to be fully aware of the powers, rights, duties, and obligations of all these groups. In addition to providing advice and communication, the the Secretary often called on to create and manage relationship between players or corporate governance, on corporate governance. The discussion of corporate governance in Malaysia, as well as other East Asian countries, should be initiated from the event of East Asian economies' collapse in the second half of 1997. The period placed a greater concern of recognition of corporate governance to the public and the private sector in these countries. Even though various factors were highlighted to explain the causes, there was a consensus among the above-mentioned ideas. The element of poor governance could not be separated in explaining the crisis. As such, like other economies in East Asia, corporate governance had been actively promoted to the Malaysian corporate sector in the period after the crisis. Measures have been taken to improve the aspects of fairness, transparency, accountability, and responsibility in running the organization. In Malaysia, the initiative started with the establishment of Finance Committee on Corporate Governance, that is in 1998, that consists of both government and industry. Recognition of the corporate governance in Malaysia was significantly evidenced by the release of the Malaysian Code of Corporate Governance by the committee in March year 2000. The principles underlying the report focus on 4 areas, including board of directors, directors' remuneration, shareholders, accountability, and audit. The code is a hybrid in nature, which is similar to the combined code on corporate governance UK. Under the approach, the companies in Malaysia should apply the broad principles of good corporate governance set out by the code flexibly and with common sense to varying circumstances of individual companies. The development of corporate governance in Malaysia is also complemented by the institutional development. The established includes the Malaysian Institute of Corporate Governance and the Minority Shareholders Watchdog Group. The inception of Malaysian Institute of Corporate Governance was established in March 1998 by the High-Level Finance Committee on Corporate Governance. It is a non-profit public company limited by guarantee, which founding members consist of Federation of Public Listed Companies, Malaysian Institute of Accountants Malaysia, a Malaysian Association of Certified Public Accountants, Malaysian Institute of Chartered Secretaries and Administrators, in short is MICSA, and Malaysian Institute of Directors, MID. And Malaysian Institute of Corporate Governance mandate was to raise and the awareness and practice of good corporate governance in Malaysia. The report of the corporate governance published by the High-Level Finance Committee on March 1999 has stipulated MICG as recognized corporate governance training center. Bursa Malaysia Berhad, formerly known as Kuala Lumpur Stock Exchange, also partake in the effort of enhancing corporate governance in Malaysia by revamping its listing requirement. For instance, Chapter 15 of the revamped listing requirements address issues on corporate governance, and one of the paramount requirements spells out that listed issuers must ensure that its board of directors make the following statements in relation to its compliance with the Malaysian Code on Corporate Governance in its annual report. That is, number 1, the narrative statement of how the listed issuer has applied the principles set out in Part 1 of the Malaysian Code on Corporate Governance to their particular circumstances. Statement number 2 is a statement on the extent of compliance with the best practices in corporate governance set out in Part 2 of the Malaysian Code on Corporate Governance, which statement shall specifically identify and give reason for any areas of non-compliance with Part 2 and the alternative to the best practices adopted by listed issuer. Latest initiative by the Malaysian government is in promoting corporate government, where in April 2017, Security Commission of Malaysia launched the new Malaysian Code on Corporate Governance, MCCG. An improved set of best practices aimed at strengthening the Malaysian corporate culture has been introduced with the launch of the new Malaysian Code on Corporate Governance by the Securities Commission in April 2017. Among the significant changes is for the large companies with a market capitalization of more than $500 million to have two-tier voting system when it comes to election of independent directors. Under the two-tier voting system, minority shareholders will have equal strength as the majority shareholders in deciding on the appointment of independent directors. Under the best practices of the code, the majority shareholders holding more than 33% of the company will not be able to decide on the appointment of independent directors unilaterally. Another significant change to the code is that companies are encouraged to fully disclose the detailed remuneration of each member of senior management. At the moment, the practice is to state the remuneration of the senior management in bands of 50,000 ringgit Malaysia. It also recommends the company's audit committee to comprise only independent directors and establishment of risk management committee. The new MCCG will place greater emphasis on the internalization of corporate governance culture, not just among listed companies, but also among non-listed entities, including state-owned enterprises, small and medium enterprises, and licensed intermediary to embrace the code. The companies and countries to attract long-term patient capital is today's globalized market corporate governance arrangement, which are effective and in line with international best practices, must be in place. These are increasingly seen as conditions for sound risk management and cost reduction and access to capital. Another good development in Malaysia is that the Securities Commission has announced a 3-year strategic plan to advance key corporate governance priorities, including the establishment of the Institute of Corporate Directors Malaysia and the Corporate Governance Council to coordinate all corporate governance. So in conclusion, while the company secretary profession takes pride in their position, has been well recognized by regulators, investors and business stakeholders, nevertheless, this recognition must come with the need for us as company secretaries to play our role and duties effectively and professionally. There is a need for us to upgrade our knowledge and increase our depth in key body of knowledge relevant to our profession. Attending this convention is one of the ways to achieve our aim as alluded to, and I must congratulate all delegates attending this convention. Lastly, another important point, the ingredients of corporate governance is, as what we have discussed these last 2 days, is the attitude and integrity. So both this attitude and integrity is a very important ingredient for us. Whatever laws being passed, if there is no our attitude is wrong and integrity, and then it will maybe one of these days we will go behind bars. So my fellow brothers in the profession, so thank you very much for listening.
Thank you, Mr. Haji Osman. I would now request Tom to take us through the salient features of King 4 report. As you may be aware, the King 4 report actually considers the shift from a siloized reporting to one of integrated reporting. Tom could take us through the salient features, and it's a very interesting report, I would say.
Thank you, moderator. As I wait for my presentation to be projected, I want to say that I appreciate being here and want to take this opportunity to congratulate your country on your recent improvements in the global ranking in the ease of doing business. I think you moved about 30 positions. and that means that your governance is going in the right direction. Well done. The second thing is still at the international level. I want to congratulate India again as a country on the re-election of Justice Dalveer Bandari as the judge at the International Court of Justice for another 9-year term. I think that speaks to your respect for the rule of law. So well done as a country. But I will not stop there. Coming further down, I want to congratulate ICSI on your Jubilee celebrations. India has the highest number of company secretaries, over 50,000. Therefore, you take the lead. And as younger nations, we look up to you to set the standards. And so it is that I want to congratulate you on the standard on dividends that you just launched. Kenya looks forward to borrowing from the same. Finally, I want to congratulate you all, starting with your president, his council, and the CEO, for a very well-organized conference. Your hospitality, your warmth. I've been to Delhi, New Delhi, and went to Taj Mahal, and I was impressed. I was in Hyderabad last year. I was very happy. Then this time round, I enjoyed the warmth of the people of Kerala. Indeed, it's God's own country. Well done. Now, I'll take you through the King 4 report, which you all know because it was launched last year, November, so it's a year old, although it came into effect in April. Then also, I will briefly look at the convergence or globalization of corporate governance. I understand that I've got about 15 minutes to do so, so I'll move pretty fast. King 4 is the latest version of this King report. The first one was held, or rather came into being in 1994. So this is the fourth revision. It promotes the running of an organization and the delivering of outcomes as an integral part. It broadens its acceptance in the sense that the code can actually be used regardless of the sector where you are. It reinforces corporate governance as a holistic and interrelated set of arrangements to be understood and implemented in an integrated manner. It encourages transparency and meaningful reporting to stakeholders. Meaningful in the sense that the stakeholders can actually understand the reports. And then it presents corporate governance as concerned not only with structures and process, but also with ethical consciousness and conduct. So the key philosophies are integrated thinking, the organization as an integral part of society, corporate citizenship, and stakeholder inclusive approach. Now I'll talk about the major changes between King 4 and King 3. King 4 reduced the principles from the previous 75 to 17. King 4 focuses on applying and explaining, as opposed to King 3, where you could comply or explain. In other words, it's not up to somebody to figure out how you've complied. You actually have to comply and then explain how you've complied. Because there was a tendency to say, yes, we complied, but you can go through the whole report and fail to understand how they have actually complied. Then there's a broadening of terminologies to underscore a wider scope. There are sectoral supplements. So in other words, it goes into specific sectors. And then it emphasizes on the independent, non-executive directors' independence. There's a huge stress on ethics. In fact, there's a recommendation for a social and ethics committee under King 4. Then it touches on IT, which you cannot overlook, and stakeholder inclusiveness as opposed to the previous shareholder focus. Then, of course, responsible investing. So the first principle about leading ethically and effectively focuses on the leadership, integrity and competence. So integrity and competence have been added to the previous 4 items, which were fairness, responsibility, accountability, and transparency. The second principle focuses on ethics for the entire organization, starting with the board. And it also emphasizes on stakeholder awareness of this so that they can hold you to account. Principle 3 focuses on the corporate citizenship of an organization, and this touches on things like disclosures on your adherence to laws and taxes, etc. The fourth principle talks about strategy and delegation to management from the board, while the fifth principle talks about ensuring that the reports issued by the organization meet not only the legal requirements, but they satisfy the unique stakeholder needs. The sixth principle talks about the board charter and committees, and the use of professionals such as external auditors, etc. The seventh principle talks about the composition of the board and the necessary balance between the skills and competence. So the independence of the chair, the independence of the chairman of the audit committee, etc., including succession planning. The eighth principle focuses on the board committees, which is basically delegation from the board. The ninth principle introduces performance management and recommends board evaluation once every 2 years. The 10th principle is on the appointment of the CEO, which is the second most important, actually the first most important thing or responsibility of a board. The second is, of course, managing strategy. The 11th principle is on risk management in the organization, while the 12th one is on ICT and the board's oversight role in the implementation of ICT. The 13th principle is on compliance to laws adopted to non-binding rules and codes and standards. Now, the 14th principle is on some transparency around remuneration, fairness, and doing so responsibly. The 15th principle is about ensuring that services and functions enable effective control, even where these are outsourced. Then the 16th principle is about stakeholder engagement. And finally, it's about responsible investing. Now, what are the takeaways from the King 4? Integrity and competence are added to RAFT, where R stands for responsibility, A, accountability, F, fairness, and T, transparency. It brings about ethics and governance. In other words, we are moving away from legal compliance to ethical compliance. Then it talks about, it brings into being the regulars that I've already talked about. What are some of the gaps? We think that it should have covered something on governance audits, which is something that we take very seriously in Kenya now. We feel that it didn't give enough emphasis to the role of the CS. Then we are aware that in India, your New Companies Act actually requires entities to set aside part of your profit for CSR. Perhaps this is something that should have been considered but we know that there's a big debate around that, whether we should actually make it voluntary or legislative. Then we feel that some more work should have been done on whistleblowing, which is very important when it comes to governance issues. Then we thought that the regulator should have been more emphasized. What are the conclusions about King 4 report? I think it continues to project South Africa as a leading light in corporate governance in Africa. I think Zara may not agree with me about this because they are undergoing some pain right now, but I think that is part of their growth. I think South Africa is still taking a lead in terms of these things. It underscores the outcomes-based corporate governance, things like performance evaluation, and it lends a huge hand to stakeholder engagement as opposed to the previous focus on shareholders only. There are, of course, those gaps that we believe will be covered in King 5. Now, I want to briefly talk about whether or not there is convergence of global governance. In fact, there are factors that are contributing to what we think is convergence of governance at the global level. This includes the need to attract and retain foreign direct investment. In fact, I think it's for this reason that India is working hard to improve its ranking in terms of the global ranking in terms of ease of doing business, and every country wants to do the same. I'm happy to say that Kenya is 20 positions ahead of India, so that is one area where I think we are doing well. Of course, the other area is in long distance running. We can run for a long time. The third one is in dealing with immediate problems that need immediate attention. I think the earlier speaker before lunch showed a lion and some gentlemen dealing with that lion. I think that was a Kenyan. So those are some of the things we do very well. In fact, lately we can kill a lion with bare hands. Anyway, that is by the way. So every country is competing, so well done on your improvement on global ranking of doing business. Then, of course, there are scandals. Financial scandals worry everybody because a lot of these entities have implications even on parts that are very far. So the global financial scandals have led to some sort of convergence in terms of global governance. Then, of course, membership in different economic blocs, professional associations like CSIA, etc., they demand that we move together. So as Kenya, we're very keen to see this standard we just launched on dividends. What does it mean for Kenya? How can we adapt it for Kenya? Then, of course, there are some court decisions that set the precedent. The sources of global corporate governance standards include successful practices, the so-called best practices, international organizations that deal with these things like the OECD, that was the first to advocate for the FTAR, and then professional bodies and sector regulators. A lot of regulators work together to take forward corporate governance. Then, of course, facilitators of long-distance commerce, such as the Chambers of Commerce and WTO. So is globalization of corporate governance possible? We think that countries are unique and are affected by history, culture, dominant religions, and applicable laws and regulations. We also think that corporate governance models across nations differ depending on systems of capitalism adopted. For example, the Anglo-Americans, they have a liberal model, whereas continental Europe and Japan have what we call a coordinated model. And both models have their competitive advantages. Then political realities in different countries mean that one size cannot fit all. Globalization of corporate governance is therefore a long journey in our opinion. Now I want to talk about the Kenyan case. In Kenya, we borrowed from everybody and adopted corporate governance codes to suit our reality. So we borrowed from OECD, Cadbury, King 3, etc. We used the model of apply or explain, because we are not ready for apply, or rather comply and explain. And there is a code for different levels, starting from our own new Constitution 2010, which talks about values and integrity and leadership qualities that we desire. However, there are also other laws that support corporate governance. However, the themes they are common. The 6 capitals are there, and our institute takes a key role in taking this forward. In fact, our institute, ICPSK, is the one that designed the code for the government and government-owned entities, and then it has offered codes for private organizations, not-for-profit organizations, etc., as part of corporate responsibility. I thank you, ladies and gentlemen.
Thank you, Tom. I would now request Zara Kasim to give us an overview of CSIA. Zara is the CEO of CSIA, and she's been doing a lot of work on thought leadership and a couple of other concepts. Over to Zara.
Thank you, Chair. Honored guests, ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. I did consider greeting you in all the languages in South Africa, but there is 11 official languages, so I think that probably would take a little bit too long. But warm greetings from South Africa to you. This is a very exciting time for India. It is also a very exciting time for the Institute. And CSIA is very proud to have ICSI as one of our founder members and to be associated with an institute that has made such great strides in the realm of the corporate secretary, enhancing the profile of the corporate secretary, as well as the skills and the knowledge. It's been astounding the last 2 days to see all the developments that's been happening in just this one country alone. So congratulations to the Institute, both on celebrating your Golden Jubilee here, but also on the excellent achievements that you've had to date. I'd like to cover today in my presentation the evolution of the role of the Corporate Secretary, and also share with you some of the developments that's been happening in just some of the countries. Obviously, we don't have enough time to go through all of the developments in all the countries, but just at a level of some of our members, some of the research that's been done, some of the developments in terms of how the role has evolved into more of a governance professional role. I think that this is a very familiar picture for everyone. On all the continents in the world, there's been a lot of talk today and yesterday about the impact of corruption. I don't think anyone has actually escaped that impact. My colleague Tom has alluded to what is currently happening in South Africa, and it is something that is endemic in most countries in the world. And I think possibly the most spectacular implosion that we've seen in recent periods, if I can just move to the next slide. Seems to be stuck. Now it's moved up. If we look at that slide, all of those names are very, very familiar to you. But probably the most spectacular one is the demise of Bell Pottinger, which happened in the recent months. When it came to asking Bell Pottinger what they would have done differently, the answers that they gave actually came too late for them. But I think there are still lessons that we can learn from what's happened there. One of the things that they said they would have put into place, certainly, was an ethics committee. And that demonstrates, if you also look at 100 of the 100 FTSE companies, 30 of them have formed ethics committees in order to embed corporate responsibility. So that is something that companies are now starting to take very seriously. And it's important that the consideration of the values of the company is also taken into account as much as the procedural oversight role. The second thing they looked at was managerial oversight. In most of these instances, management turned a blind eye to what has been happening. And this is the case where they would rather risk the reputation of the organization by taking on clients whose values are contrasting with the values of the organization. And Bell Pottinger's found it was a huge mistake for them to actually do that. Thirdly, was to put in place a whistleblower policy and an enabling mechanism for employees to be able to tell the management about things that are going wrong. And the important thing there is that if you know what's going wrong, you can actually address it. These lessons were too late for Bell Pottinger, but I think there are many companies that can now learn from that. If we look at Wells Fargo, the case that happened there, again, the board in its responsibility, they failed to protect the interests of their stakeholders. And that included the employees, it included the customers, the regulators, and the community. And I think there's a lesson to be learned there in terms of also looking at the needs of all stakeholders, not only the shareholders. One of the factors that has led to the almost instant demise of Bell Pottinger is the fact that we do live in a VUCA world. It's a world that is volatile, it is uncertain, it is complex, and it is extremely ambiguous. And with the changes in market forces, in business processes, it's important to stay on top of what is happening. You cannot turn a blind eye, because with all the developments that's happening, it will not escape the community and the public eye. So if we then look at the OECD, if you look at how corporate governance is defined, and you're all very, very familiar with this, it's defined as the relationship between the management board, shareholders, and other stakeholders. Also in providing structures to set company objectives, the means of obtaining those objectives, and monitoring the performance against those objectives. Again, you're all familiar with the components of corporate governance, the structures, the business ethics, risk management. But again, when we look at these components, these are actually the functions of the corporate secretary. And this is where the role and the evolution of the role comes in. So when we look historically at the corporate secretary, initially they were seen in the 1800s as a mere servant. And as that role evolved, looking at it from a business perspective, as business processes changed, as the legal situation changed, that role evolved into being much more than just an administrative role. We then looked at the statutory duties that were being performed, but in addition to that, the role also evolved into additional functions of being compliance officers, risk management managers, in addition to being administrative officers, and also more of a governance officer. So that role started to become much more eminent. The skills that were required of a corporate secretary in this new role included having a much broader knowledge of the business, much more interpersonal communications, which actually extended beyond just being at the board level. Resilience, and you probably all know about that. Calmness under pressure. Things can get quite exciting in the boardroom, and the corporate secretary needs to be calm and stay neutral. It's also about being diplomatic, objective, and using professional judgment. I think very often the corporate secretary almost disappears in the boardroom, but they are actually the ones that are being neutral and that are keeping things together in that situation. So what does a sector actually look like? There are an estimated 250,000 professionals working in this sector in over 100 countries. And the sector is worth in excess of $36 billion US. I bet you feel important, and you should, because that is how huge the sector actually is. The problem is that the sector is not recognized as a profession, and that is part of what we need to cover in terms of how do we recognize the corporate secretary as a professional. So many countries have made quite a lot of, have had quite a lot of developments when it came to this recognition. Individual countries have started looking at their legislation and how they can recognize the corporate secretary as a governance professional. If you look at the different countries, and I've just got a few here. Obviously, there's many more. In South Africa, it is said the company secretary should be the central source of guidance and advice to the board. The UK should be responsible for advising the board. Again, very much moving away from that administrative, much more into a strategic leadership role. In Australia, they should be accountable to the board on all governance matters. Kenya, to advise the board members regularly on matters of governance and the applicable law. Bangladesh, company secretaries advise senior management and the board on their responsibilities and liabilities with regard to legal and regulatory requirements. So as you can see, great strides have been made by many countries to further that recognition of the role of the corporate secretary in a much more governance role. So we have a lot of different situations in the different countries. The point that in India, it's called a company secretary. In the UK, in Australia, it's a corporate secretary. In China, we talk about a board secretary. So there was a need for corporate secretaries to speak with one voice. And this is where the Corporate Secretaries International Association was formed. It was formed in 2010 and registered in the Commercial Register in Switzerland in terms of Article 60. In 2017, that's this year, we have relocated the organization to Hong Kong, and it's incorporated there as a company limited by guarantee. It is an international federation representing more than 100,000 corporate secretaries in over 70 countries. And currently, we have 14 country members. So the organization consists of member countries instead of individual countries. Our vision is to be the voice of all corporate secretaries at a global level. And our mission is to develop, grow, and promote best practices within the secretarial, corporate governance, and compliance areas. And we do that by issuing or improving professional standards, the quality of governance practice, and organizational performance. and I'll talk a little bit more about what we do specifically. So our purpose then is mainly to promote the status of professionally qualified corporate secretaries. You may wonder why I'm talking about recognition of corporate secretaries. I know that within each country that recognition is there. Specifically within India, it's recognized. There is an act that recognizes corporate secretaries. But at a global level, there is still a lot of disparity when you look at the different countries and how the corporate secretary is recognized. So that is really what the purpose is of the CSIA. We're also looking at exchanges between organizations. I've mentioned all the work that's been done by India. Similarly, a lot of work has been done by many of our member countries, and it's about sharing those best practices amongst the countries. We also have many organizations, very young organizations. Currently, there's 2 organizations in Taiwan that was established this year, and we are currently helping them to also achieve their objectives in terms of growing the corporate governance and corporate secretary profession. We do also carry out research at a global level, looking into best practices for corporate secretaries. And importantly, it's promoting that recognition at a global level. And my last few slides, I'll focus on a current project that we're working on with the World Trade Organization to get global recognition for corporate secretaries. So this gives you some idea of the 14 member countries that is currently part of the CSIA membership. So we have Australia, Bangladesh, Southern Africa, India, Singapore, Kenya, Zimbabwe. We also have Nigeria, the UK, the USA, Canada, and Indonesia. 11 of our members are full members, and they therefore participate in our council and the decision-making of the organization, and 3 of our members are affiliate members. So just a little bit of some of the work that we have been doing over the last 7 years. What we really build on is the strengths of our individual organizations. And with all the work that's currently been doing in individual organizations, it helps us to build a much stronger profession. So some of the knowledge sharing events that we have done is the development of the Corporate Secretaries Toolkit with the IFC in New York. This is a complete training resource for corporate secretaries, and it is available in our 14 member countries as a free resource and can assist and facilitate the training of corporate secretaries within the country. We've also been promoting the professionalism of corporate secretaries through our governance principles for corporate secretaries. These are all available on our website. We've also done research on 20 practical steps to better governance. Again, this is also available on our website. And more importantly is we are looking at lobbying governments and also influential organizations to promote and recognize both corporate secretaries and governance professionals. So just to look at some of the developments that's been happening in some of the countries. Some of the laws that have been shaping how the corporate secretary's role has changed and has been embedded in legislation in the USA, in the United Kingdom, in South Africa. Tom has spoken about the King IV Code. And others would be the OECD legislation, ICNGN, and the CACG legislation. As an example, in terms of what's been happening in India, again, you're very familiar with this, the Company Secretaries Act of 1980, which governs the profession, the institute. The Companies Act of 2013, which has increased the powers of the corporate secretary, and conferred a very special status to company secretaries. It also codifies the functions and duties of the corporate secretary. In Kenya, and these are very recent developments, 2015, the Code of Corporate Governance Practices for issuers of securities to the public also recommends that the board be assisted by a suitably qualified and competent company secretary who is also a member of the Institute of Company Secretaries of Kenya. They play an important role in supporting the board, and the functions and duties are also outlined in the legislation. In 2017, that's this year, the Certified Secretaries Bill provided for the establishment, powers, and functions of the Institute of Certified Secretaries. So that provides for qualifications, registration, and regulation of certified secretaries. Some research that's been done by the UK body, ICSA, and I'll just share some of the findings, which also leads to how the role has evolved over time. Just move this along. Sorry. I'm not sure which way I'm supposed to point. There we go. So the project was a collaboration between ICSA and the Henley Business School. In 2013, they looked at investigating the role of the corporate secretary, and they interviewed over 200 corporate secretaries, executives and non-executive directors, and collated this data both from the UK, Ireland, but also countries like Mauritius, Tanzania, etc. So some of the findings that came out of the research much luck here. Here we go. So there are some areas which are known facts, which you all identify with, some observations, and some recommendations. So obviously it's known that the role is much more than administrative. The corporate secretary is now also providing much more strategic leadership and providing a bridge between the board and executive management. Often secretaries are the longest serving members present at board meetings, and as such they become a repository of knowledge which is often overlooked. Some of the observations to share with you: the corporate secretary is actually in the best position to align the interests of the different parties. So looking at management, the board members, and being able to align the interests of all of those, facilitating the dialogues that are happening, keeping a clear head and remaining neutral within the debates. Board members are often unaware of how board secretaries are actually supporting the organization, and they lose out on a lot of knowledge and skills that are within the corporate secretary's realm. Their role is also becoming increasingly outward focused. There's a lot more interaction with shareholders and stakeholders in the role of the company secretary. And they also contribute much more to board effectiveness. Some of the recommendations that corporate secretary should report directly to the chairman, and that will ensure much more effectiveness within the process. They should also have direct access to board members and informal access to board members. Very often, a lot is picked up in informal conversations with board members that is missed within board meetings. And also the separation of the role of the company secretary and the head of legal, which can actually be conflicting. If you want to have a look at the full research report, you can download it from the ICSA website. So as I said earlier, there is currently a project that we are working on to get global recognition from the World Trade Organization for corporate secretaries. And that is to update their services sectoral list to take into account a separate classification for corporate secretaries and governance and advisory issues. At the moment, there isn't a separate section or classification for corporate secretaries. So we are requesting that this is recognized within a separate classification. These are some of the subcategories that we are proposing, and again, this is a proposal at this stage. So we're still working on the proposal. It's not been finalized yet, but these are the proposed subcategories that we are looking at. In terms of corporate governance services, core value assimilation and implementation in business and management policies and practices, corporate secretarial services, the audit and compliance services, certification, and corporate advisory services. These will be some of the subcategories within the classification that we are looking at. And the benefits of this recognition would be to increase trade in such services. Also important for us is to facilitate the sharing of good practices. And I think really important is to foster continuous improvement in corporate governance, standards, and outcomes. So I want to leave you just with some food for thought. We know that businesses very often ignore the impact of corporate governance matters. We know how important that is. We know in terms of how things are changing at such an incredible rate within the business environment, how important it is to keep the records. And we know that the recognition of the very unique skills that the corporate secretary brings to governance, corporate governance, needs to be recognized. So I want to leave you just with something that you probably can all identify with. Thank you.
Thank you, Zara. That was a very good food for thought. May I now request Mr. Rashid Khan to give us an Islamic perspective?
We request Mr. Rajesh Sharma, the council member, government nominee, to join the panel on dais, please. Mr. Rajesh Sharma, council member.
The moderator, the panelists on the dais, the present and past members of ICSI, and present and past council members of ICSI, the representatives of members institutes of the Corporate Secretaries International Association, the participants and faculty members from different states and chapters of India and abroad, the Secretary of ICSI and his team, and the organizers, very good evening. Very good evening. And Assalamu alaikum. I would also convey the best wishes from our institute, from the president of our institute, Mr. Muhammad Sanaullah, who could not attend this grand occasion. The topic selected for me is corporate governance, Islamic perspective. While I listening the theme speech at the last convention of ICSI, in which your president, Dr. Sham Agrawal, encouraged me to have knowledge in corporate governance from different religions. And later, from the international congruence to promulgate International Corporate Governance Day held in Hyderabad, the organizer, the chairman of the chapter, insisted me to think about the corporate governance Islamic perspective. However, I will have some discussion on the topic. It will not be much better, it will not be rich. But I will start from the topic, what is corporate governance? You know better what is corporate governance, the definition of corporate governance, principles of corporate governance, features of corporate governance, features of good governance, and the requirements of good governance also. To me, good corporate governance is based on ethics, and it has 4 pillars: transparency, accountability, responsibility, and transparency, accountability, responsibility, and fairness. Who are the actors and parties to corporate governance? Shareholders, creditors, auditors, regulators, managers, directors, all are men. And ladies and gentlemen, the word will include women also. Then corporate governance, Islamic perspective. Issues to be discussed: learning from the background and objectives of creation of man, general and official agents of the Creator, some guidance, and then conclusion. Learning from the background and objective of creation of man. I will not have any comparison of religious perspective. I will highlight the Islamic perspective only. To consult with the fellows while you are taking any decision. The Creator, when decided to create man, he called upon all the Firistas and discussed about the creation of man, his desire to create man. and he created man. Men have been created as the Khalifa, agents of the Creator, to do all good things. Men have been created only that they will be obedient to the Creator. Sorry for the spelling mistake. Men have been created only that they will be obedient to the Creator, their principle. Being an agent of the Creator, men must possess the attributes of the Creator. In every level, there has been a guardian who will be responsible for his fellows. Every man must follow the instruction and guidelines of his guardian, leader, regulator. The Creator sees the deeds of every man, and uninterrupted audiovisual records are being taken. In this life, man is to face numbers of tests, examinations, verifications of compliances. Based on the tests, examinations, verifications, men shall be rewarded in the life hereafter with Jannat or Jahannam. During evaluation and rewarding of a man, his companions will also be taken into consideration. General and official agents of the Creator. Generally, every man is an agent of the Creator. Nobis and Rasuls are his official agents. Muhammad, peace be upon him, is the last Nabi and Rasul. Then man got 4 Khalifas who were nominated by the last Rasul: Abu Bakr, Umar ibn Affan, Umar ibn Khattab, Usman ibn Affan, and Ali ibn Abu Talib were 4 Khalifas. Learning from some guidance, Abu Bakr al-Siddiq was the first Khalifa who gave some instruction to his fellows. Always fear Allah, the Creator. He knows what is in man's heart. Improve your conduct first. Others will improve when they see your example. Be always truthful so you can get good advice. Keep away from untruthful men. Be intimate with truthful and faithful companions. Be sincere to all whom you have dealings. beware of cowardice and dishonesty. Direction given should be brief. If too long, they are likely to be forgotten. When you are free, sit among your men. This will keep in touch with them. Then in conclusion, I would say Islam teaches to be responsible, Islam teaches to be responsible, to be accountable, to be transparent, to be fair, and to yourself, to your family, to your organization, and to your country. And also teaches to be ethical in all respects. So, from this slide, I will conclude. In Islam, men are advised to be accountable, be transparent, be responsible, be fair to all the stakeholders. So, Islam is nothing. Islam is a system. Islam teaches to be compliant with corporate governance. Thank you all.
Thank you, Rashid. That was a very wide concept of governance. Thank you very much. I would now request Mr. Rajesh Sharma to give a bit on the Indian perspective. Of course, in India, we have both disclosure as well as approval, a mix of disclosure and approval with respect to governance. And over to you, Rajesh.
Thank you, Savitri. Mr. Osman, Mr. Tom, Madam Johra, and Mohammad Samanullah, and our worthy President, young and dynamic Shyam Agrawal, along with past President and other dignitaries of the dais. A very good evening to all of you. It is always good to address few chairs around with few persons. Thankful to all of you for being here till this time to boost up the persons on the other side. I'll be speaking few things on Destination India. And it is also for all of you. India is the buzzword now. Hope you all agree with me. I can say the future is of India. India is going to lead the world. Last year only, if you take the GDP growth, our GDP growth was 7.1%. And if you compare it with China, it was 6.3%. If you compare it with UK, it was 1.8%. With USA, it was 1.6%. So we are far ahead. We are going in a good pace. I do agree. Due to some reforms, we have come down in GDP to some extent. Now we were running around 5.7%. In last 1 month, we have again picked up and is about to cross 6%, and definitely the growth is ahead. But friends, India is led by a great and strong leader, a person with a positive will, a person with a strong will. Why I say strong will? You would have never heard any person taking such drastic steps and such reformative steps which are not populist. वो सिर्फ अपने वोट बैंक के लिए नहीं करते, वो ये सोच के करते हैं कि भैया देश जिससे आगे बढ़ेगा हमको वो करना है. And that he has shown. A vote for that leader. हम तो दरिया है, हमें अपना हुनर मालूम है, जिस तरफ चल पड़ेंगे रास्ता बन जाएगा, जिस तरफ चल पड़ेंगे रास्ता बन जाएगा. That is our leader Narendra Modi, the way he is taking ahead the country. He is having a vision. His strength you can see in Dokulam. इंडिया की टेरिटरी में चाइना वाले घुस आते थे, हम कुछ नहीं कर पाते थे. अब भूटान की टेरिटरी में चाइना वाले घुसे तो हम वहां घुस के रोक दिए कि आपको वापस जाना पड़ेगा. That is the strong will of this government. You would have seen when we crossed the border in the eastern part as well as in the western part in Pakistan. The way demonetization, a non-populist move, but was it not required? It has improved the tax base. And that is need of the hour. इंडिया में ज्यादा लोगों को टैक्स देना पड़ेगा. इंडिया का टैक्स टू जीडीपी बहुत खराब है या नहीं? इंडिया का टैक्स टू जीडीपी आप 16-17% के बीच में ट्रैवल कर रहा है, अगर नाइजीरिया का हमसे अच्छा है. चाइना 28% पे है, यूएस 25% पे है, अर्जेंटीना 37 है, ब्राजील 34% है, फ्रांस 47% है.
Sir, we all appreciate what you're saying. We all appreciate the great leader Narendra Modi, all of us. He's as good as. The topic is international governance. Madam has asked you to give a perspective from the Indian company's point of view. We would appreciate if you could please restrict your presentation to that topic. Thank you so much.
Friends, let me also say that I was to give the perspective, the Indian perspective being destination India, which is now required, and it all depends on the leader who has taken the country ahead. So definitely without quoting those things cannot be done. So at the same time, I'll be saying one more thing. GST is a great reform. And first time in the country from Kashmir to your area, Kanyakumari, we have moved ahead. So, friends, all the parameters, if you check, of the macroeconomy, they are taking up in a positive way. And we, the company secretaryship, the fraternity of company secretaries, should move ahead with this. We need to encash all the new things which are coming ahead. It should be GST, it should be other areas. Definitely, we should sail in the boat, otherwise we are going to miss the bus. That's the reason I'm saying this, because मैं definitely ये देखता हूँ कि company secretaries बड़े limited area में काम करना चाहते हैं. Most of you are into job, but the ones who are into practice, they only want to do the secretarial work. जो government आपको दे देती है वो करते हो. You can do accounting, you can do managerial work, you can do legal work, you can do n number of works. But you restrict yourself. You need to know you are custodian of the country's corporate structure. You need to pump in confidence and move ahead. Set your goals for your practice. Set your goals for your life. And that way you need to move ahead. And if we take the way standards have moved, I can say the World Bank, Transparency India, IMF, Moody, each and every area is of doing business, which is one of our area. We have jumped 32 points. So we are moving ahead in all direction. And definitely India is the buzzword which will lead the whole of the world in days ahead. And company secretaries need to take a very great responsibility in this. They need to move ahead with the country, ahead of the country. And I can say one thing, those who face sun don't see the shadow. So you have to face the sun. ठान लो तो जीत है, मान लो तो हार है. So अपने आप में ठान लो कि हमें जीतना है और इस देश की तरक्की करा के रहनी है. Arise, awake and stop not till the goal is achieved. The goal should be for yourself. The goal should be for the country. And hats off to this profession where I see more than 50% females pursuing company secretaries when are already company secretaries, which we cannot find in any of the profession anywhere. So, friends, make use of your time, think out of box, move ahead with the country, move ahead with the profession, and we all are pillars of the profession which can build this profession ahead. कई बार हम लोग सोचते हैं कि गवर्नमेंट हमें जो काम दे देगी वही काम करेंगे. आप बहुत कुछ क्रिएट कर सकते हो. मैं तो ये कहता हूं कि आपसे बड़ा कैरिकुलम किसी का नहीं था, इफ यू चेक, एंड आपसे टफ एग्जाम किसी ने नहीं पास करे. तो यू आर एट टॉप ऑफ द वर्ल्ड. You can do definitely wonders. And when we speak of corporate governance, definitely all the persons who are taking the torch of corporate governance ahead, specifically the company secretaries and all other the independent directors and all others who are involved, they have great responsibility on their shoulder. India is improving in corporate governance to a great extent, and with time, we definitely feel that we are going to go ahead, we are going to march ahead, and with this, definitely we will be speaking on the panel because I was told by the moderator that the time is less. My best wishes to all who are here to attend this beautiful city, and the organizers, the regional team as well as the branch team who have coordinated here a beautiful program in this good city and a beautiful city of Thiruvananthapuram. Thanks to them too. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Rajesh. Actually, I have a good number of questions to ask my panelists here, but I'm also aware of the paucity of time that we have, but I am going to ask a few questions and thereafter throw it open for the question-answer session with the audience. Seeing all these presentations and also seeing some of the provisions of Companies Act, especially with respect to cross-border mergers, which has now been permitted, I feel there is a potential which is slowly growing. I would not use an adjective of good or great at this juncture because it's early days, and I would only say that I see these shoots slowly growing there. And it's in terms of gaining domain knowledge in several jurisdictions, because Indian companies are now investing in several other jurisdictions. You do see Indian multinationals, if I may use the term. Given this particular scenario, Zara, how do you look at harmonization of practices, especially secretarial practices, coming up as an area of work in the years to come?
Thank you, Savitri. I think from our perspective as the Corporate Secretaries International Association, one of the areas that we are focusing on is to look at good and best practices at a global level and to share that with our members. A lot of good work is currently being done in all the member countries. Obviously, what is being done sometimes is specifically relevant to the particular country, but we believe that there are some of the practices that we can collate into good practices that can really apply across all the different regions and at a global level. So one of the areas that we are looking at and will be looking at in the future is looking at maybe global standards for corporate governance, and working with our member countries to achieve that. In terms of the work that's being done at member country level, the sharing of best practices is currently happening. We would like to expand on that and take that to the rest of the world as well. So that is definitely something that is on the agenda in the future.
Tom, would you like to add something to this?
Yeah, the question from Savitra was about whether there is some sort of convergence in the company practice in different countries, and I would say that there is indeed. However, you'll find that there are just some slight differences between country and country. If I take your standard for meetings, for example, there are certain things that are very common, but there are certain things that are country specific. I think in your standards, if there's no chair within 5 minutes, board members present can appoint one from their own, and the meeting goes on. In Kenya, I think we give it 15 minutes. For an AGM, we give it 30 minutes. You know, in Africa, we have a lot of time. Time is actually a suggestion. It's not very specific. So they're just a difference that are country specific.
Yeah, that's true. In India, we give 5 minutes for a board meeting, 15 minutes for a general meeting. So yes, that's right. Norway, is it audible? Yeah. Norway has a very high percentage of women board members. It's almost about 41 to 42% of board representation that they have. In India, of course, we now have a mandatory provision in case of listed companies and other companies if they meet the thresholds to appoint at least one woman director. What is the practice in Malaysia or in Kenya or in any other countries, Bangladesh or the rest? What about board diversity?
Let me go first. In Kenya, we are trying to implement this 1/3 gender rule. So in every board, if it's a public entity, then 1/3 of the members have to belong to one gender. So that could be female, male. We even tried it in parliament, it's not worked completely. So there's that drive to go that way, but we are not yet there. But for public entities, for sure, we're implementing the 1/3 gender rule.
In Malaysia, there is no separation between gender. In actual fact, they encourage ladies to become the top leaders.
In Bangladesh, we got new law in 1994. It is already old. We are in process of getting new Companies Act. And the Corporate Governance Code introduced in Bangladesh in 2006 has been superseded by another corporate governance guidelines which has been initiated by Bangladesh Securities and Exchange Commission in 2012. It is under process of amendment. We propose that women participation in board should be encouraged, and the SEC will soon publish new corporate governance guidelines, and we hope it will be incorporated in Bangladesh.
Thank you very much. Tom, actually the King 4 report is a voluntary compliance, it's not mandatory. So how exactly has the compliance been accepted by the corporates? What is the level of compliance there? I do understand it's not a comply or explain, but if you adopt it, you have a comply and explain. However, what is the level of acceptance and what is the level of adoption? Because King 4 is basically an Institute of Director report which has been published, although all the reports of King 1, 2, 3 were also well accepted. Over to you, Tom.
You're right. King 4 is a voluntary code. You're not obliged to follow it unless you're required by some other law to do so or through some regulator to do so. It came into effect on the 1st of April this year, so it's a little early to determine the level of compliance. But the reality is that those who will comply then will endeavor themselves to the market. They'll endeavor themselves to investors, they'll endeavor themselves to those who appreciate transparency, those who appreciate good corporate governance. So I think much as it's voluntary, it's in everybody's interest to adopt it.
Sure. Zara, in your presentation, there was a very good point on getting the services listed in the WTO list of services. And in the subcategories, one of the category was one on secretarial audit. What is the practice in other countries? As you may be aware, in India, secretarial audit is compulsory in case of listed companies meeting a certain threshold. So what's the practice in other countries, and what is your take on secretarial audit generally?
Yeah, I think it differs from country to country. Obviously, some countries have just legislated it, so there are still processes that need to be put in place. I think Kenya has put it into their recent legislation. I think that it is really good practice for countries to adopt that and to do government audits. I was also very excited to see in the exhibition hall that there is a lot of software companies that have already started developing products and software that will enable audits. And I think that is certainly going to go a long way towards ensuring compliance. It's going to make it very difficult not to be compliant.
Would you like to add to that? Yes. Secretarial audit. On secretarial audit.
Regarding the compliance rate in Malaysia, because the companies are under the supervision of the registrar of companies, so normally at the beginning the compliance rate was not so good. So what they did was to advertise for those who are not active or dormant. So they are encouraged to apply to strike off the companies. So the registrar of companies have the power to strike off the company. So they use that power for these companies who are dormant to apply the company to be strike off. So they call it, at a certain time they call it moratorium period. So they will make it easy for these companies to be strike off. And then now, if I'm not mistaken, the exact figure, I don't know, but it's above 90%, the compliance rate.
Okay, thank you. Tom, in your presentation, you covered a point on CSR. Of course, in India, India is the first country to have legislated and provided for a specific contribution towards corporate social responsibility and activities. Different categories of activities have been listed in the Companies Act. From your presentation, I got a flavor that there is no legislation today in Kenya dealing with corporate social responsibility. Would you like to just explain something further on CSR, which was on your slide?
Yeah, indeed, the law in Kenya does not require one to set aside funds for CSR. But again, just like for this voluntary compliance with King's report, those who are active in meeting the needs of the locals where they do business will of course endear themselves to the locals. There are many players who've tried to come to Kenya who have failed just because they didn't have any chemistry with the locals. I think it's a strategic decision you've got to make. We in Kenya think that CSR should actually be handled at the strategic level if you want to operate anywhere in the country or indeed in the world. So it's voluntary for now, but the reality is that those who identify with the locals, those who have chemistry, those who the locals are comfortable with, then do business easily, and then you find that their products are doing a lot better.
Lovely. The floor is all yours. Please feel free to ask questions. First of all, I must thank the entire audience because I know we have overshot our time considerably, and I still find hands going up wanting to raise questions. That just shows the interest. And it's basically because of all the panelists here. Please go ahead, Shekhar.
Yeah. I'm Shekhar from Kolkata. Yeah. We have had a very interesting debate on corporate governance. And worldwide, over the last 2 decades, we have had several initiatives to strengthen the corporate governance. But essentially, what I find is the focus has been on developing the board systems, procedures, and structure, and of course the disclosures and the reporting systems. While this has addressed the issue of corporate governance, the structural issues of corporate governance, but what I find is the basic issue of business failures have not been addressed, and adequate attention has still not been given to the issue of risk management. If you see, we had the failure of Lehman Brothers and Lehman Brothers, and which we had WorldCom and Enron. All these corporations which have been around for more than a century collapsed because of failure of risk management systems. And these were not adequately addressed. And with each business failure, we have had further strengthening committees looking into it both, and we had Sarbanes-Oxley, and we had several revisions to the combined code of corporate governance in London. And closer home, we have had right from Kumar Mangalam to Narayan Murthy, and most recently the Kotak Committee on Corporate Governance. Even if you look at the situation with respect to banks, we have 800,000 crore of NPAs, which is a record NPA, which shows a colossal failure of governance at the banks level, at the corporate level. Because 800,000 crores, and now they require a huge bailout from the government, and the taxpayers' money is going to fund these failures. So, essentially, I think we need to look beyond the tick-box approach. We need to look beyond the structure and systems and see how effectively we can address the issue of business failures and ensure that we have effective risk management systems in place to see that these kind of issues are not repeated. And I would like the panelists to share their experience on how the corporate governance systems have addressed the issue of risk management and business failures. Thanks.
Would you like to answer?
Hello.
Okay.
Good afternoon. Good evening, panelists. My question is that in India, also there is a provision regarding CSR which is a comply and explain provision. In other jurisdictions also we have comply and explain or apply and explain. But most of the companies, they generally only try to explain. They generally are not willing to comply. So what is your take on that?
Sorry, can you just repeat the question? I actually missed the initial portion. Are you you referring to the Indian context, which refers to comply or explain, or?
So I am just giving an Indian example where in India, most companies try to explain the non-compliance of CSR rather than actually trying to comply. So in other jurisdictions also, are there such provisions, and how are they being dealt with?
Sure. Currently, the way the law is drafted in India, under Companies Act 2013, Section 135 merely requires you to comply or explain in the director's report, in the board's report. So, going by the section, the leeway has been given. If I were to look at the spirit of this particular section, I would say that while this is a new provision in India, there's been a bit of a leeway which has been given to the boards of the different companies to see whether there is any reason for them to pull back this particular amount and not spend it in a particular year. If the reason given is valid, then it's up to the board not to spend or to spend less is the way possibly the lawmakers have considered and accordingly drafted the provision is the only explanation that I can think of. And therefore, if it is properly explained, it will not be a violation and Section 450 will not get attracted. Yeah. Yes,
hello.
please.
Yeah,
Sorry.
I got two questions for Zahra.
Just one sec. Yeah, Tom, you wanted to say something?
I'll attempt to answer his question on risk management. Risk management is one of the new developments in King 4. It was not there before. You've talked about the effects of Enron, WorldCom, etc. As I said in my presentation, some initiatives on corporate governance are as a result of some corporate failures, some scandals, etc. So in the past, risk management was only a subset of the role of, say, the audit committee. But in Kenya, for example, now, the insurance sector requires that each insurance company must have a risk and compliance officer as part of the licensing requirements. So you'll find that risk and compliance or risk management is now taking a center stage. Again, a report on the risks faced by the entity and steps to mitigate those risks have to disclose in every board meeting. If those are not captured, if there's no risk register and an update on the same, then you will find that your continued licensing would be at risk. So it's a new development. Hopefully, it will reduce the number of corporate failures or scandals that we witnessed in the past.
I'm just going to take one more question, please.
Yeah, I got two questions for Zara. There was a slide.
You may choose one of the two, please.
Yeah, okay. Then it is about the role of a company secretary and a legal head. It was said that the roles are contradictory and a company secretary should not be a legal head. I completely differ. In fact, the role of a company secretary and a legal head are absolutely complementary, and more than that, a company secretary is best suited to be a legal head. What is your opinion?
Company secretary and the legal head. Okay, before I hand over to Zara, I think what was probably meant is that the role of a company secretary itself is becoming meatier from what it was earlier, and therefore it should not be clubbed with that of the legal head. But anyways, let me hand over to Zara.
I think the perception is, and this was, remember, part of the findings that came out of the research report, is that there could be a conflict of interest between the head of legal and the company the general counsel and the company secretary, and that could lead to conflict. So that is why the separation, it is believed, would be necessary in that case.
Thank you very much.
Excuse me. In the context of his reference relating to risk management, there is a specific confirmation to be given by the statutory auditors relating to this point. I think the members should read into that. Statutory auditor has to clearly state what is their risk management policy relating to the business of every entity. There is one point, there is a latest amendment, and it is available. It should be stated in the statutory auditor's report. I just like to remind to the members about it.
Absolutely, that's absolutely right. And also the audit committee is supposed to be reviewing it under section 177 in any case. That's absolutely right. Thank you very much, it's been wonderful. And I would just like to sum up and say that the one statement which clearly sticks out is that it's not just about doing what is legally correct, but doing something which is right, given the circumstances and the situation. And with that, I would like to thank all my panelists here, and you all have been really excellent. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Madam. Now, Mr. Osman bin Ujang, the President of Malaysian Association of Company Secretaries, would like to present Dr. Shyam Agarwal, the President of ICSI, with a token of appreciation. So I request the presence of Dr. Shyam Agarwal on the dais. So, ladies and gentlemen, with a huge round of applause, we are witnessing Osman bin Ujang in felicitating Dr. Shyam Agarwal with a token of appreciation. Thank you, sir.
President sir, we request you to be on the stage, please. We have one release of publication, Foreign Direct Investment, a Practitioner's Guide. The Institute has brought out this publication primarily focusing on Foreign Exchange Management Act, Foreign Direct Investment in India, establishment of branch office, liaison office, project office, and compounding of contraventions under FEMA. The book being released is Foreign Direct Investment, a Practitioner's Guide. I request Mr. Sudhakar, Vice President, Corporate Legal and Secretarial, Reliance Industries Limited, Mr. Manoj Sonawala, Mr. Atul Mehta, Mr. Girish Goyal, and Mr. Deepak Jain to kindly come forward to facilitate our distinguished speakers. I request Saurabh to kindly arrange the certificates Shahid Ki Beti to distinguished speakers, please. Mr. Sudhakar, Vice President, Corporate Legal and Secretarial, Reliance Industries Limited. Mr. Manoj Sonawala. Thank you very much, Honorable Moderator and the distinguished speakers, please. Thank you very much.